So welcome everybody to today's web conference, Shifting Our Goal from Individual Knowledge Change to a Community Mobilized for Norms Change. What does it take to move from a skills building focus to practice and policy change success? I am Ashley Meyer. I am here with Prevent Connect, and I see so many of you joining from really different places in terms of weather. It looks like we have a lot of cloudy and overcast. Some of you are having a nice cool front. Canton, Illinois, 64 and cloudy. Fairfield, California is bright and sunny, and I have to say I share with Leona Smith-DeFaustino, who in the top of the public text chat said that she's in a live action version of Dante's Inferno. So I would have to say Annie Lyles from Prevention Institute is here with me today, and we're in the same location, and I think we both can absolutely agree with that.
Yes, I'm here to provide Ashley with the laugh track for all of her jokes.
Yes. So let's just talk a little bit about Prevent Connect, as many of you are familiar with. We are an online community focused on the prevention of sexual, domestic, dating, and related forms of violence. And our main site is there. I circled it on the screen. It's preventconnect.org. We have, you can contact us via email. We have an email group. We have an e-learning site, and we have a wiki, and then a lot of social media. So I've just been writing all over your screen, so enjoy that. And today's technology. So I want to ask you all, if you're needing some attention, if you'd like to, we might ask you at times to raise your hand. So let's just go ahead and everybody in the top, I'm going to circle it on your screen. That's just on the slide. So look to the top left and raise your hand, please. So it says My Status. It's a drawing of a hand, and you can just click on it, and that will raise your hand. So I see many hands going up.
And while hands are going up, Alan, I want to encourage you to push *6 and go ahead and say, hi, I got your email, and we'd love to just test your sound really quick.
Hi, I got your email.
Ah, perfect. That's the ultimate sound check. Great news. All right, Ashley, turn it back over to you and hand raising.
Thank you. So I'm going to lower all hands. It looks like you all have the hang of that. We really, really encourage you to use the text chat. And you do have a private chat option. So if you go over to the chat box, you see public, everyone can see that. If you would like to private chat someone, you just click that tab, select their name, then you can share information maybe you don't want in the public chat. For example, maybe your email address or your phone number, things that you don't really want to share with everybody. You certainly can, but we love to provide you with that option. PowerPoint slides are available, so if you're not seeing them right now, then go to the top of your screen and you should see there's a Start tab in gray, and then there's one that says Presentation Slides. If at any time your slides go away, just go ahead and click that. They should come right up. We are going to ask you some polling questions after this slide, and so I will show you how to do that in a second. Phone, we do have closed captioning, so I'm going to make sure you're all able to get that. So we want to thank our partners at Aberdeen Captioning for allowing us to have captioning. And we'd also like to ask you all to, of course, adhere to very typical web conference guidelines. We always have great, respectful conversations here, and we would like to continue to do that. So Prevent Connect is a national project of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, sponsored by U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the views and information provided in this web conference do not necessarily represent the official views of the U.S. government, CDC, or CalCASA. So let me bring up those polling questions I promised to ask you. And even though I haven't officially introduced Annie Lyles yet, she is here with me, so we'll go ahead and ask you all to answer the following polling questions. You should see them on your screen. So it's, have you attended a web conference before today? So you should see that right on your screen and be able to click. Sometimes it can be a little hard to see, but to the left of your choices, no, this is my first web conference, yes, I've done 1 to 2, I've done 3 or more. You should be able to click a little button right there. So I'm going to share the results. So Annie, it looks like we have 39% who've attended 3 or more. So we have an audience who is familiar with these, but we also have some new folks. So we welcome you all as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. About 20% of you, 1 in 5, brand new. Welcome to the family. 40% of you, almost half, are long-term members of the community. So it's wonderful to have you back. I personally am super excited. This is the last Prevent Connect of the Prevention Institute season, finishing up our 10th year with Prevent Connect, and I think I'm at 40 of these, if you can imagine. So I'm super pumped. I'm ready to have some fun. We have some amazing guests lined up for you, but most of all, I just love hearing from everyone and kind of learning together. So looking forward to today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to ask you one more question. Let's get to know each other. It's coming up on your screen. So what best describes your organization or agency? And just click the option on your screen. So Sexual or Domestic Violence Coalition, or DUAL. Are you a college, a university, another educational institution? Are you with the federal government or a tribal organization? Are you with the territory? Other community-based programs, HIV, STI, reproductive health, child abuse, mental health, healthcare, LGBT, community-based, general, faith-based, military, criminal justice, fund, foundation, or other. So if you have to click other, please go ahead and type in the text chat where you're from, what type of organization that is.
So about a quarter of you have already responded with DUAL, Sexual Violence and Domestic Violence Coalition. That's great. And then we've got all kinds of different partners here with us. We've got our sexual violence agencies, our DV agencies, but we also have college and universities, state territories, child abuse, child maltreatment. Welcome. We've got our CBOs and the faith organization and military with us. Fantastic.
So wonderful. We love to have the audiences kind of spread out across the different issues. So that's really wonderful. So I'm going to take these polling questions away. Oh, and it looks like Barbara has another. She says Dual Military University Service Academy. So that's really great to hear. Welcome.
And Abigail is joining us from Legal Aid, and Caitlin from the Nonprofit Evaluation Organization. Caitlin, stick with us because I have added some evaluation of community mobilization towards the end, but I'm certainly not an expert. We look forward to having you chime in. Welcome.
And okay, and I'm just taking the polling questions away. So we're going to go back to the slides. They should have popped up for you, but if you're not seeing them, again, top of the screen, you can press presentation slides. And, you know, I just want to welcome, I'm going to put David Lee's picture up. David is here with Prevent Connect and Calcasa. So hello, David. I don't know if you want to go ahead and say hi, but feel free to do that.
Hi there, everyone. Great to see so many people and familiar faces on such an important topic. So looking forward to hearing more.
Yes. And Leona Smith-Faustino is also with us. So hello, Leona. If you'd like to say hi, feel free. No pressure. We do also have, and I'm sorry, Crystal, I don't have a picture, but we also have one of our interns with us, and that's Crystal Sanchez. So just wanted to say hi to you as well. So really want to welcome our team members as well. So this is the last one, Annie, of this year. It's our last web conference together for this year, but this fiscal year.
And we just mentioned that next year starts October 1st.
Yeah. So, you know, but it's always kind of, you know, bittersweet to complete a series. So we've had many. They are all recorded and up on preventconnect.org, and we encourage you to check out those recordings. It's been a great year and some really, really engaging topics.
And I would say that the most recent two, the public sector partnerships and health equity goals, I've been going back to that text chat, looking at them. I feel like I learned so much from the text chat on those two. So if you're interested, don't just check out the slides. Be sure to check out the text chat because there's a really wonderful fountain of knowledge based on kind of the things folks offer up.
And these slides are available for download, and I will post that link in just a second.
Cool.
So Leona, I'm going to put your picture up again, Leona, with your wonderful cat. It's not coming up, but hopefully it will at some point here. But Leona, who I introduced before, is our staff on the Ending Child Sexual Abuse web conference series that we've been doing for several years now with the MIS Foundation. So actually, it's interesting. Some of you might have wondered why I said she has a cat in her picture. Annie and I are actually showing two different pictures, so you might be seeing a different picture of Leona. So in case you're really confused by my comment, that probably clarifies it. Anyway, so Leona is in charge of this wonderful Power and Prevention series, and we have just released the dates for these new web conferences of this new fiscal year. And the first one's going to be Unique Opportunities for Child Sexual Abuse Prevention, Learning from Migrant Farm Worker Communities. I'm going to put that link up for you as well because there is still room to register. So I encourage you all to register and to check out what's going to be coming up. And as many of you know, Prevent Connect, again, we focus on the prevention of sexual, domestic dating, intimate partner, related forms of violence, and we really want to look at violence across the lifespan, really prevent it before violence starts, and connect to other forms of violence and oppression. And most importantly, what we're actively doing right now is we're connecting to each other. So I encourage you all to really take advantage of the space that you're all sharing right now and to learn from each other and to share your resources and to make those connections. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Annie Lyles, who, as she said, has been here partnering with us on these web conferences for a very long time. And Annie and I know each other from our work on the ground in San Diego.
I think we might be celebrating about 10 years of professional colleagues there, Ashley.
I think so as well.
All right, well, let's start this party. Thank you all so much for joining. We have about 138 of you online, so that's fantastic. Thank you for the introductions. I see we've got Canada, we've got Georgia, we've got Texas, we've got a nice representation across the U.S. Today. Let's see where we want to start. So I do want to introduce our web techs behind the scene. Vanessa and Casey are keeping the text chat going, making sure the tech aspects are working seamlessly. You can message them if you need to, but big shout out for Vanessa and Casey for making this all happen. The learning objectives today really go to kind of understanding a mobilization approach, but concretely putting it into place. And that's really the focus of today, is thinking about what are the steps of a mobilization approach. As Ashley mentioned, we always start with the frame of primary prevention, taking action before sexual and domestic violence occurs. That means we're not focused on screening, we're not focused on building awareness. We're really thinking about what is it that we need to change in order for sexual and domestic violence to never occur in the first place. We use this continuum for new folks, up front, in the thick, and in the aftermath to help kind of just give a conceptualization for that. Upfront strategies, the ones we're focusing on today, take place before violence has occurred to prevent that initial perpetration and victimization. In the thick, aftermath, also very important strategies, but the focus of our work is the upfront piece of it. We're going to go, for Prevention Institute, when we think about what it is we need to do for sexual and domestic violence, one of the things we start with is the understanding of norms. What does it look like in a community when sexual and domestic violence is a part of the work and is a part of the fabric of that? There are 5 key norms: the culture of violence, narrow definitions of masculinity, limited roles for women, power and control, and privacy and silence. For us at PI, these are the types of things that we would want to see change in order to prevent. So if you're mobilizing community, these would be some of the types of things that you would want to mobilize community around. Today's agenda is kind of 3 parts. As I mentioned, we're going to define mobilization, really explore its value as a kind of a newer strategy. It's not a curriculum. This is a little different. And then also kind of think about the steps to mobilization. What does it look like to put this into place? And this is a part where we're really going to turn to you all to help think this through. The first thing I want to do is offer just a kind of a shared definition, which is community culture. I wanted to start here because mobilization is really about shifting norms in community culture. This is the definition that we use at Prevention Institute: a set of core beliefs, values, practices, principles, norms, or behaviors that are held by a group of people who have common interests and willingness to work together to achieve them. So sit with that for a second. Community culture can be geographic. It could be based on interest groups, but we're trying to shift community culture. That's really the goal of mobilization, the starting place for this work here today. Community engagement is the process of beginning to shift culture. And I offered CDC's definition here. I think it's a really strong one. It's the process of working collaboratively with and through groups of people affiliated by geographic proximity, special interest, or similar situations to addressing and affecting the well-being of people. Have you seen this before, Ashley?
I have, and I really think it's a very clear and concise definition, and so I like how it gives us, a lot of different characteristics to think about when we're thinking about community and what we might share in common.
Yeah, for me getting started with this, I was having a time separating out community engagement versus community mobilization versus culture. And so I feel like culture is the outcome. It's the thing that we want to shift those norms in. Mobilization is the strategy we're using, and the first step of mobilization is engagement. And so it's really kind of three distinct things to unpack today. And luckily, we have some experts in the house that have been doing this work and thinking through this as they've been doing their prevention work. So with that, I want to introduce our great guests from the Hawaii RPE team, Paula, Helene, and Valerie. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi. I'm going to do just a brief introduction for everyone. Excuse me. Helene is an MSW. She's a licensed social worker who supervises public health programs for Hawaii's Department of Maternal and Child Health. Programs include the prevention of sexual violence, domestic violence, child abuse and neglect, home visiting, parenting and family support, and adolescent and youth wellness. Welcome, Helene.
Thank you.
And Paula is with us as well. She's the executive director of the Hawaii Coalition Against Sexual Assault. Her career includes planning and implementation of sexual assault center treatment services, Hawaii's Adult Sexual Offender Treatment Plan, the Juvenile Sex Offender Plan, and authored the demonstration project components for the Hawaii School-Based Violence Prevention Curriculum. Paula, welcome.
Hi, aloha.
Aloha. And the third part of this multi-sector team, Valerie. Valerie is the chief of the Community and Crime Prevention Branch, the Hawaii Department of the Attorney General. She supervises crime prevention programs including sexual assault, underage drinking, internet safety, prescription drug misuse, bullying, and substance abuse. She's a trainer for creating vigilant, prepared, and resilient communities for homeland security. Valerie, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Yes, it's such a pleasure to have the three of you, precisely because you've done kind of this thinking as a team and a multi-sector team. Usually we try to keep it to kind of one guest per site just because of the logistics of it all. But for us, when we started talking with you, it was so clear that your work is really done in partnership, and so we're so pleased to have the three of you here with us today.
Thank you for having us. Yes, it is a partnership. This is Valerie, and it's been a great partnership since, I believe, 2006.
Yeah. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got started? I'm going to put this up there. You shared a picture. Why is it that you kind of started thinking about a mobilization approach for your RPE work? And for those of you that don't know the acronym, RPE is Rape Prevention Education. It's a funding source from CDC. So they're working primarily on sexual assault prevention.
Good morning, this is Helene. So for the RPE grant, going back as far as 2006, the task for Department of Health was to develop a primary prevention plan to prevent sexual violence. And so developed by the Department of Health, then the plan was approved by CDC, and then we had a 225-page document that was approved, and then we realized, well, now what? We realized that instinctively we...
I'm sure people in the audience relate to that. I have a 250-page plan, and now what feeling?
And so instinctively, when we use the term work group, that includes the three of us, Valerie, Paula, and Department of Health. Instinctively, the work group understood that it could not be a top-down approach, that it would not be well received by communities across the state. So the work group brainstormed to come up with an idea of how we could make that happen, which is where Valerie and her experience with the Department of the Attorney General came up with this great idea that we kind of massaged to fit our needs.
So we'll have Val tell her about the Attorney General's community mobilization model that was adapted to the Department of Health prevention plan implementation.
So this is Valerie. So in the early 90s, crime prevention, gangs, drugs, they were all big issues for us nationwide. And community mobilization was an approach used with regards to crime prevention. So when I was at the 2006, the national conference, when I saw that model, the public health model being used, I thought that was a great way, and it was a great model to use with regards to mobilizing folks from different aspects of the community, from organizing them, talking about what priorities, working with everyone together. And when we actually pulled this model together, people from different disciplines came together as multidisciplinary teams from different communities. Sometimes they were topic-based, sometimes they were group-based, but the model itself is very flexible because we realize, it's no longer a top-down approach. Our resources are, even way back then, are very limited, that we need to really start pulling it together. For crime prevention, we knew law enforcement couldn't do it all, so we have to work with the community on that level. And, there's that model there. You see that nice little wheel that Ashley has pulled up.
The model for you guys, because I think this makes kind of the idea of community mobilizing pretty concrete. When I'm talking about shifting community culture and doing community engagement in order to get that community mobilization, I feel like for folks this gives them a good sample of kind of the steps that you've taken in Hawaii to really go through this and evaluate together, implement together, and together is key. It sounds like in this one, and we'll have a chance to talk more about specifically how you do that in a second. But before we go too far, I wanted to introduce our second guest, and thank you guys for doing the introduction. But Alan, you're here with us. If you could unmute yourself, I wanted to do a brief bio on Alan. Alan is the director of the Center for Educational Transformation and co-directs the Mentors in Violence Prevention Leadership Institute at the Center for Violence Prevention at the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Little different community culture perhaps than Honolulu. As co-director, he oversees all campus bystander education training and implementation, curriculum infusion of bystander strategies with pre-service teacher education programming and MVP bystander training and outreach to Iowa's K-12 school districts and college. He's also worked on the Sioux City Project and researched gender violence prevention programs, including coaching boys into men. So, Alan, welcome. You're here?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear. Thank you, Alan. Alan, I'm so excited to have you here. Hawaii's work really looks at kind of community mobilization, and your work is a little different. It's looking at mobilizing schools as a community and thinking about the work of schools and K-12 schooling as community. Can you tell us a little bit why you chose kind of that as a community that you wanted to wrap the work around?
Well, sure, and thank you for participating on this this conference, this webinar. This is really important work, obviously. It's my focus and attention towards mobilization happened in the school system because, quite frankly, that was my professional career, entering as a secondary educator and coach, working with young men and women since 1980, 1983, 84. That's the arena in which I knew best. But what I remember from entering the teaching profession was that I landed in a community in Sioux City, Iowa, where there were already norms established amongst the professionals in that community, the certain nonprofits, schools, who already were meeting regularly to talk about some of the challenging behaviors that Valerie was mentioning earlier with regards to gangs, diversity. People think of Iowa, they think of a traditional, very homogeneous Midwestern state, and that's never really been my experience professionally. The schools and the communities in which I've lived in Iowa have been very diverse and steadily increasing so. And what I walked into in my first years of teaching was, again, the school was a hub, or was part of an already established mentality and focus that we work together here. And so that's almost as if I kind of just took that every school district kind of operates, that there's strong partnerships with community organizers, with domestic violence coalition members, and with juvenile court and services and other nonprofits. So I was really inundated with that concept early on and saw that as really the way in which we do business here. So for me, it was a stretch.
Yeah, let me jump in because I think that's interesting that I introduced you how community culture probably is pretty different in Iowa versus Hawaii, but you have just immediately proved me wrong. That actually this concept of, the way we do businesses together is certainly kind of what I've heard the folks in Hawaii talk about it as part of their community culture, and clearly a starting off point for you as well, and probably the basis of why you all chose community mobilization as a strategy. Anyone from Hawaii kind of want to correct me on that one?
Can you repeat the question again, Annie?
I was just saying that it seems like part of the culture that both you and Allensburg and Iowa have in common is that it's based in this concept of we do the work together, that there's an assumption that folks are really partnering together in order to do the prevention work.
Annie, hi, this is Val. Yes, that is true, and it fits in very much into our, our Hawaii culture as well. How everyone is sort of connected, feels connected to one another, or if we're not connected, we look for ways as to how we can be connected on different levels, whether it's a personal level or like with school or a professional level. And that's just kind of like the method or the methodology as to how we work here, because there's such a sense of aloha that we have for one another, and we want to go ahead and help others out.
Yeah, one of the things I'm always really interested in, and Alan, you can weigh in on this, is how you build on the assets and strengths of a community in doing prevention work, that a prevention work isn't always about, changing something, but really allowing infrastructure and process to kind of let something grow, something like a value for community connection and a value of doing things together. It seems like a mobilization strategy would allow that. You have a figure that you've shared with us, and I want to pull that up about the Sioux City project, and I wonder if you could talk just very quickly, Alan, about how it is that you kind of approached the infrastructure here across all these different ecological layers.
Right. Well, thank you. Like a lot of communities, there are multiple agencies that are just doing wonderful work, doing great work with regards to it could be awareness towards alcohol and drug usage, prevention. It could be housing issues. It could be domestic violence and sexual assault, obviously. But the other agencies, nonprofits who work with youth and families and communities, oftentimes have their own set of strategies, their own strategic planning, and what the multidisciplinary agency meetings that I referenced earlier, it was very clear that there was just so many amazing opportunities to connect and overlap with each other and to support each other, because we are all wanting more healthy, more safe, respectful communities, relationships, and those types of things. And schools were an important piece to that, but certainly was not the only piece. But it seemed like that's where the majority of students were assembled, and all the agencies working towards the healthy, respectful relationships and culture and climate. We all agreed that these are part of all of our outcomes and our goals, and to not meet and work together would be a disservice to not just our agencies but the broader community. So the leadership.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to jump in. I think one of the things that's exciting to me about having both you and our Hawaii team together is that you've started with the same values, and for your work, some of it, isn't grassroots organizing. It's really doing the mobilization within the systems that are impacting schools, which is really important. But sometimes I think under, what do I want to say? It's skipped over a lot of the time. And with Hawaii, you've all thought about it in terms of kind of geographic and interest groups, and have really been open to responding to the assets and strengths of these community groups. So it really bodes well to kind of go deeper in your process. And what I'd like to do now is open up to the audience to share a little bit about their experience as well. So we have a text chat question that I would really love to hear from folks on. And what we want to know to start with is kind of what value does a mobilization effort offer? We've defined it. We've kind of shown you two models in Iowa, where we're using the school as a kind of an organizing venue, and the sectors there, and in Hawaii where they've done some grassroots organizing. And again, we'll go into more details, but I'd love to hear from you first. What value does mobilization effort offer? And I'll let you go ahead and start texting that in. While they do that, maybe Team Hawaii, could you talk a little bit about what was important to you, what value you were being able to get from doing this mobilization model?
Hi, this is Helene. Well, one of the things that we recognized was that communities, whether it's by discipline or interest or geographic, that communities really know and understand what's important to them, and they know who their leaders are. And by creating these, or allowing the communities to create their own teams, it promotes ownership, and then developing action planning to help the state implement our sexual violence primary prevention plan.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like if we're trying to implement, I don't know, I'm not letting go of the 250-page plan. Like, what's the possibility of implementing that? The possibility lies within really building the capacity of folks in your community to buy in, to get ownership. I saw Nwando talked about ownership and relevancy, both themes that came up. What are you seeing in the text chat, Ashley?
Rebecca Klein just said, mobilizing also creates more players to play with. That's a good way to phrase it.
Well, so Michael also comments that it adds a connection to the larger community outside of our field, which is a really important piece when we're thinking about changing norms and thinking about how we do that. Matthew also points out it brings a variety of skills. That not all of us have a lock on all the skills required, and that mobilization allows kind of a broader set of skills to come to the table.
This is Helene. I just want to let you know that when we got the 225-page plan approved by CDC, we then recognized it was too huge a document to be a day-to-day tool to use. So
you didn't make copies for each member and ask them to read it in detail?
No, but what we did do was the steering committee and primarily the work group, the three of us, we developed a 10-page user guide. So we narrowed 225 pages down to 10 pages. And that's the day-to-day tool that the community teams, all the members have a copy of, and it's something that anybody can use day-to-day.
We should also point out, this is Paula, that Helene was really the person who was instrumental in getting the original, we call them CAT groups, community action teams, going. Because we didn't have much time to pull together the first annual meeting of the community action teams. And Helene was very resourceful. For example, she met someone from Molokai at a conference, and then asked her whether she wanted to form a CAT team, and this woman said yes, but was having a difficult time finding members from her workplace. So when she was at the feed shop that weekend, she asked folks, and that's how the Molokai Community Action Team first got started.
That's awesome.
So that's a geographic type of community action team. And then we also have, for example, an interest group team. Well, one is the LGBTQ, an underserved team, and that got formed. Actually, Val and I formed separate teams. The coalition has an LGBTQ advisory committee. So we morphed that, not morphed, but asked them if they would be willing to also serve at the community action team, which they did. But many of the members of the LGBT team, our advisory committee, are also leaders in the community too, and their plates are full.
Let me jump in really quick.
So we had to expand the team. Some had to drop out, and we have since expanded the team and added younger, newer members who are using the community action team as a way to build capacity and develop the leadership. And the older members on the LGBT team are bringing them along and mentoring them. So we're at the building capacity level right now, and we'll probably be changing the community action plan, which Val can talk more about later if anyone's interested.
Yeah. Well, and I think what you're saying to me brings up a point that Abby's making in the text chat, that we're shifting kind of away from helping people, with air quotes there, to really saying, our goal is to prevent sexual and domestic violence. What does that problem look like in the community, and how do we solve it? And I feel like that's one of the really unique aspects of your work in Hawaii with the LGBTQ groups or the geographic group, is that violence is very local and very specific to community culture, using our kind of broad definition. And you're really allowing folks to tailor this and make sure that it's relevant. Alan, I wanted to see if you could chime in about kind of the mobilization efforts, because as someone pointed out, Alice pointed out, that schools have very specific cultures as well, and your mobilization efforts are really allowing schools to define and define this problem and the solutions as well.
Well, yeah, our efforts and our resources in our community go to support the our middle school and high school students to really chew on and really support and roll their sleeves up and get engaged with conversations about sexual assault, sexual violence, unhealthy forms of masculinity, because adults can run around with their heads cut off, as long as they want to, and have great logic models and have wonderful strategic plans. But if the information, if the strategies don't engage young kids where they are and ask them to think about what they believe, what they think about their role in being responsible for contributing to healthy relationships, positive culture and climate, then we're missing the boat. So with our spectrum of prevention model, all of our efforts in our community should focus in on supporting where the rubber meets the road. And to me, that's always made sense. We as adults in agencies, we support conversations and support the education and the primary prevention strategies that we are asking our young kids to engage in, and to be those near peer, those mentors to younger students. But I believe, especially after Columbine in 1999, that if we want to get at culture and climate and get at core issues that we've got, this has to get to the students themselves. They are a powerful resource.
Well, and I think Deborah also mentioned that, when you think about messages coming from multiple places that are coordinated, mutually supportive, and I'm quoting her word for word here, it both increases doses and builds on related issues. And that's really, that's a very powerful option. As a field, we've shifted, I think, from saying, look, we have evidence-based curriculum, you just have to implement it this exact way, and then you will have this great outcome, to saying, oh, actually, we need to listen, and that an evidence-based curriculum may be part of our solution, but we can't come to a group or a community with the solution. It's about engaging and listening, and that process is just as important in terms of getting to outcomes.
Annie, can I chime in on Alan?
Please.
Comment? This is Val. I totally agree with him, because that's exactly what Hawaii does. We listen to what we call our policies, our CAT, Community Action Teams. We find out the model itself is very fluid, so we're always listening. We're always trying to figure out what resources they need to kind of do what they need to do in their communities, what skills, what new information, and it's all about listening and figuring out where they are at the table, because sometimes, people are different. no one's receiving any money for any of this. So, people can give only so much at different points of their lives, personally or professionally. Sometimes more work is just they can't give as much. Other times they can give a little bit more. So we're always listening and we're always evolving the model to meet the needs of the community. So I totally agree with Alan.
Yeah, and let's talk a little bit about the model. We've talked about the approach, and I want to really get into the specifics of how you actually do that. So steps to a mobilization strategy. We've done a lot of thinking and a lot of working with communities that are doing that kind of mobilization work. And so we have some very specific steps that we would recommend. And the first step is not organizing a large community engagement event. Surprise, surprise. The first step is thinking about your own internal practices and your own internal training within your organization. And for us, we're really thinking about, are you prepared? What type of training do your staff need? Earlier, someone commented about facilitation skills and how important that is. It's really important because a lot of folks have trained to be the expert, and that's their comfort zone. So if we're going to do a mobilization strategy, we have to start thinking about how we are expert listeners and expert facilitators, which is a little bit different set of skills. And it requires some thinking that for some folks, it's a bit of a shift. So when we recommend people think about mobilization, the first step we recommend is thinking about that practice and training. This slide that's coming up is it's actually in the wrong order. So I'll just be honest about that. This was the slide I thought I was going to see next, but it summarizes the value of doing some of this mobilization. So this is a good summary. And actually, I don't think it adds anything that you already didn't come up with the text chat, but ensuring the needs and concerns of community residents are there, building local capacity, not just of residents, but of government, of organizations, opportunity to build the strong partnerships and can result in stronger, better outcomes. We include things like this kind of summaries for you. So if you're doing grant writing, if you're having to make the case to others, you have something really succinct to take with you. So surprise, surprise, that's where that one showed up. But this was the one I was looking for. This is a great quote, and for me it kind of summarizes the value in a much more macro sense. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea.
Wow.
Have you seen that before, Ashley?
I have not seen that before, but I'm certainly longing for the immensity of the sea, and that picture definitely helps.
Yeah, I just think sometimes we need, I've been trying to incorporate more arts into my web conferences, and for me this really summarizes the shift, is that we're not teaching someone a specific skill. That may be part of what we're doing, but if you're really thinking about what is it that you want for your community, what does success look like, and how is it that we get there? The collecting the wood and assigning tasks, that may come later, but it doesn't make sense to lead with that. And that's the shift when you're going from individual skills to mobilization.
And it's such a positive and hopeful approach, which is something I think we're really yearning for in this movement.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. So let's see here. I had two comments, though, before we move on. And, Abigail says that it's one of her all-time favorite quotes. Oh, that's so good to hear. I just found it, so it's one of my new favorite ones. One of the things with mobilization, and I think Hawaii and Alan, you've hit on this, is that the technique must fit the purpose. That there's all kinds of ways of doing community engagement, but you don't start with a photo voice project because you think photo voice is cool.
Right.
It is cool, but you start with what is it we need to learn, and then you choose your engagement tool based on what you need to learn. You choose your mobilization strategy based on what you'd like to accomplish. The other point I wanted to make before we went too far was about disenfranchised communities and how they must have a genuine voice in the planning and implementation of projects. Community engagement is a key for ensuring that communities that aren't always included have an opportunity, and sometimes communities that we're not as familiar with within our own community. So what I'd like to do is kind of turn it back over to excuse me, our guests, and Alan, maybe you could chime into this a little bit. For you, when you think about what makes your community mobilization successful, what would be some lessons learned, some things that you think have been good?
I think Thanks. That's a great question. Consistency of message is important. So when our trained student mentors were receiving their kind of curriculum and protocol to use with younger students that were directed by the adults who were trained first, we were supporting those messages of nonviolence, healthy relationships. If we want to support the notion that it's important for all of us to recognize the difference between a healthy and unhealthy dating relationship. And so when our students were having those conversations, they were seeing posters, media campaigns, television ads. They were seeing all kinds of messaging supporting what their work in our communities, posters, billboards, bus signs, and so that consistency of message is critical. Our young kids sticking their necks out and basically challenging some of these antisocial, these sexist, racist, homophobic words, language, attitudes. They needed to see. We need to have their back and support those messages in our broader community, and also then being patient to understand that you have to be diligent and understand that change, social norm change, it takes time. There's one step forward, two step back moments, but over time, you can move needles socially and attitudinal if we stay on message and be consistent with that.
Right. So when we suggest to folks that they start thinking about community mobilization, we say, think about what practices you have in your organization, what kind of training staff need, and then when you go out and engage the community, you want to think about what that looks like. And I wonder from the Hawaii team, can you talk a little bit about what were your first kind of challenges in developing, these teams? I heard that one was formed through meeting on the beach in Molokai, but maybe you can talk a little bit about when you decided to take this route, what were some of the first steps you took in engaging community as one of those second steps in the whole mobilization process?
Hi, it's Helene. So in trying to get to form community action teams, I can say that a challenge in developing the approach was that this process began during the national and state recession when programs were either being reduced or eliminated. So what we were facing at that time, 3-4 years ago, was very limited resources. But, going back, oh, look, our military team is on.
Yeah.
Military community action team. But one of the things that I want to stick with on the theme of fluidity and listening to our community partners, we're very fortunate that as of February this year, we have a full-time RPE sexual violence prevention coordinator, Joanne. So she constantly has dialogue, communication with each community action team. So she listens to what their needs are. And then on the larger scope, annually, we have training. Like this year, we're allowing for about 130 participants for our annual community action team training. So we try and make training available to all community action team members in the state, and that's going to come up in October. But it's again, all about listening and adapting and the process being fluid.
Yeah. It brings up for me, and let me see, one of these, this is America Bracho, when she talks about community engagement, and I think I've shared this quote before on Prevent Connect, but it's your main investment in sustainability, it's your main investment in accountability, and I think one of the things that I hear from both you and from Alan's work in Iowa, that this is actually about supporting folks that are really interested and passionate about this topic and giving them a platform that allows them to actually build their capacity to do it. So kind of putting your weight behind and your expertise behind the work that they're doing. Do you think that's a fair characterization?
This is Helene. Just a comment is that I think the interest and desire to implement sexual violence prevention was strong, and this can be considered one of the biggest success to our sustainability because like Val mentioned earlier, and I let the teams know a few years ago, we have no money.
Right. and they stayed. Let me keep moving because I want to get to some of the other concrete examples. So we said if you're going to do a mobilization strategy, you want to get your practice and training done. You want to start engaging the community. And then the second step, once you have folks kind of around, is fostering some of those shared priorities. And I want to talk a little bit about what they did in Boston with the VIP initiative. This is in Massachusetts, and it's a community violence example, but the work that they've done there I think is really interesting. They basically said in order to prevent violence, we're going to invest in community, very specifically in these 7 neighborhoods, and we're putting money in for one coordinator, similar to the model in Hawaii, but they also put in money to pay block captains that were going to be kind of organizing their neighborhoods and making recommendations back to Boston. They've had amazing success with this. If you're interested in this model, you can let us know. We have quite a bit of resources on it, but that's really how they funded their work. They put money behind it, though. They wanted to build the infrastructure behind it. While they didn't have large cash awards, they could provide the training that folks wanted, and again, put the expertise behind the county in implementing some of the solutions folks are interested in. I wanted to include a nod to my political science background, is that sometimes bureaucracies deal best with other bureaucracies, and so when you're implementing a community mobilization approach, it's wonderful that the residents have the background of something like the Center for Violence Prevention in Northern Iowa, or the county or the Attorney General, because sometimes that's what bureaucracies pay attention to, and I think that's a position of privilege. While we don't always feel like we have the power, we can certainly become powerful advocates, and we don't always want to put community members out there and have them hold the weight on their shoulders. That community mobilization isn't about transferring the power, but about working together.
Annie, this is Alan.
Yeah.
Sometimes the elephant in the room with regard to community mobilization are those who are actually engaged in doing the work. And let's just be very clear and honest that this work has been marshaled by women. And I think a community strategy has to include strategies on ways to engage men and younger men and boys in this conversation. Because as an example, 14 years ago, when we in one of our large high schools of 1,500 students began the training of potential mentors in our bycenter model, had 250 girls interested in participating in that, and 12 young men. So right there was an eye opener for me before I was even knowledgeable as a school administrator, understanding the gender difference and the gender perspective. And you can't talk about this work in community if you don't talk about privilege, if you don't talk about engaging men to work with the women who have been leading the charge. So I would just make sure that we acknowledge that's an important piece to gaining community buy-in, and also shifting culture and social norms. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we see right now is in the field of sexual and domestic violence that folks are really focused on youth mobilization specifically. They're focused on mobilizing men and boys, and they're focused on geographic communities. And I think what's exciting about the folks in Hawaii, and you can weigh in here, is that your structure allows any of those groups to kind of be a part of this. And we have the slide here talks about 4 very specific ways you can engage community: identifying existing community-based organizations, establishing an advisory board, using key community members that can bridge marginalized communities, and providing venues for direct community input. Again, this isn't mobilization, but this is the third step. The second step in doing the mobilization, that you have to engage the community. And what I wanted to do is we'll do a quick pop-up quiz, Ashley. I want to hear from all of you in the audience. We have 145 of you here. How many of these strategies are you all using? We're going to launch a pop-up poll. It should be popping up in the bottom left hand, that little pie chart, A, B, C, and D. How many of these community engagement strategies do you use regularly in your work? So all 4 would be A, all 3 of them would be B. Again, you just chime in and click on that feedback box bottom left. Are folks being able to chime in, Ashley?
Yes, they are, and it's moving around right now.
I know. There's something immediately gratifying about having to put in there. So, I mean, again, this is not mobilization. I want to make sure we're being a clear distinction between engagement and mobilization. Engagement is a step to doing the mobilization. We've talked about practice and training. Now we're looking at kind of strategies to engage. The next step with that engagement is fostering shared priorities. We're going to go there next. But I wanted to see, Ashley, maybe you could share what's happening there in the poll chat.
And some of you are putting your answer in the text chat. Go ahead. You can click on the right or the left bottom side of the screen. You can actually click the option right there, and it says feedback. It's a feedback poll with a circle pie chart.
Oh, and I love it. Rachel is pointing out that for her youth mobilization work, it's A, but for the parent mobilization work, it's C. And I think that's true. Sometimes we have different levels of comfort and different levels of investment depending on different groups that are here. But it looks like most folks are using 3 or so of these strategies already. That's fantastic. I had a feeling you all were pretty well versed in this. So let me ask you, what other comments or what other strategies hold promise? So we volunteered 4 that we think are really core to doing this work. Excuse me. But I'd love to hear from others, what other engagement strategies are you using? So we talked about advisory boards, community members kind of being bridges, venues for direct community input, kind of identifying existing organizations. But let's hear from you all in the text chat. What are some other engagement strategies that hold promise?
So go ahead and just type your answer in and answer, what are other engaging strategies that hold promise? Already we see Annie from Rebecca, she's talked about consensus building.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of those things where I feel like I wish we got taught that in high school or at least in undergrad women's studies or something, right? Political science, social work. It's a term I really like, but I don't feel like I know a lot about it, or there's a lot of capacity out there to do that, even though that there's a lot of support for it. Megan's chiming in with social media, absolutely. Matthew's chiming in with empowerment, especially for young people. Alan, maybe you could chime in here. What other engagement strategies are you using when you're mobilizing schools?
Again, great question. Part of the engagement strategy for the communities that have been working at primary prevention strategies and sustaining them have been just that, the sustainability. So again, keeping stakeholders and constituents informed, up to date, communicating the successes, communicating the needles that are moving with regard to attitudes and beliefs about the issues of the different behaviors and actions that would constitute sexual assault, violence, bullying, gender-based violence, and really communicating what those how those attitudes are changing and shifting, and celebrating those. So that's I guess I see that as one way in which to continue the process and keeping people informed and engaged. And so
let me ask you this. Sarah asked a question in the text chat. She said, what are some of the best techniques used to build trust necessary to work with communities? And school is a group that are pretty skeptical. They get a lot of requests. I'm sure it's really hard for them to figure out who it is to prioritize and to make room in the school day. How do you build trust as part of that engagement process?
I think one way to build trust goes back to what was mentioned earlier with the idea of building consensus. If every person's voice has a chance to be heard and listened to, you don't have to maybe they don't necessarily want you to take their example and run with it, but to be heard and validated for what they're thinking and believing is important. So having those systems set up to hear the voices and input from others, give ways for people to provide input, do an environmental scan, talk about what areas are priority for our community, and then find those strategies that can hit multiple targets, right? I mean, so but trust is something that you have to work at and build, and certainly with changes and mobility of participants and leadership. I mean, those are all, it's ongoing, and you have to stick to it.
So, I mean, I think one of the things I'm seeing in the text chat is that this is about a relationship, and that community engagement are strategies that build relationships, and with investment, you're able to earn trust. I love Rebecca's comment very succinctly. It's acting in a trustworthy manner, right? So it's not asking for input when you already know what strategy you're implementing. It's not, hosting a meeting and saying, well, nobody came, so this is what we're going to do.
Right.
It's really investing in that relationship. Team Hawaii, I know I heard you chime in. Do you want to kind of chime in on strategies you're using to do engagement? And if you want to kind of also chime in on trust very quickly, that would be great.
Okay, this is Val. It's all about when we bring people to the table, it's all about telling them really upfront and setting those clear expectations. So I think that was a comment from a while back that I just wanted to go ahead and chime in on. And with regards to leaving titles at the door, because sometimes our teams, we have different folks coming in at different levels, professional levels. And it's really important that we tell folks that, hey, we're checking those hats at the door. And when we're at this action planning table or this discussion table, everyone has a fair say. Just because you have a doctor or an MSW or whatever after your name, it doesn't make a difference. Everyone has a fair say at the table. But with regards to relationships, what we would, in Hawaii, I sort of mentioned early on that we build connections. So whether the connections, and I totally agree about building trust. So it's all about, on a professional level, I'd say, making sure that you're going to be there and what you say you're going to do, that whoever's going to say that that they said they're going to do it, that they're going to go ahead and follow up. They're going to be there to support. And for Hawaii, it's all about honoring the culture, whatever that culture could be, whether it's an ethnic culture or a culture of climate. And, in Hawaii, we love to eat. So finding those relationships and connectivities, sometimes it's around food oftentimes, or providing caregiving services for families to bring them to the table so that they don't have to worry about feeding their kids and finding babysitting time for their kids if you want them at the table.
Yeah, and this is Helene, just to throw in an extra thing about Hawaiian culture. I mean, Hawaiian only in the sense that kuleana is the Hawaiian word for responsibilities. I mean, it's not just a Hawaiian thing, responsibility, but kuleana, when we say it's everybody's kuleana, to everybody's responsibility to prevent sexual violence, I think that's where we're successful and where we continue to have new community action teams that want to form. And as far as the Department of Health and the work group here is concerned, we say, yeah, why not? Why not keep expanding and creating new community action teams, because again, it is everyone's kuleana responsibility to prevent sexual violence.
But that is correct. It's all about building relationships and having trust in that other person that they're going to say what they're going to, that they're going to do what they say that they're going to do.
Well, this is a perfect segue, because I think one of the things we wanted to cover in this web conference is not just what kind of practice and training you need, how to engage the community, but now that you've got them engaged, what's the next step? And when you do mobilization, that next step is fostering shared priorities. And for Prevention Institute, we have 4 specific things that we're interested in doing once you have folks at the table, whether you have sushi and pork, as you shared, you guys were snacking on for breakfast in Hawaii at the table. But what is it that you do? That's the real question. It's not information sharing. The first thing you want to do probably is think about what the root cause is for that community condition, and what's driving illness or injury, in this case sexual and domestic violence, with the community. You're doing that with folks at the table, and you're developing a structure by which the community can help shape the priorities and choose engagement activities that build on the capacity of those community members to expand and to take this on as their own. And the last piece of this, which sometimes I think gets forgotten, how important it is to identify messages that effectively communicate the priorities. It's the ubiquitous 250-page down to 10-page. Those are all aspects of fostering shared priorities. What I want to do is quickly turn it back over to the audience. And let's do a quick poll chat here. Poll chat. I'm mixing my metaphors, my web conference metaphors. A feedback poll. How many of these shared priority strategies do you use regularly? So I put the 4 of them in there, and I don't know why I put it in such a small font. My apologies. But if you're looking at the 4 things here, identifying root causes, again, not in your office, not reading up on it, but talking about what community engagement, what those folks think are the root causes, and then shaping priorities together, choosing activities together, and then messages around that are relevant. How many of those are you usually doing? And go ahead and use that feedback box that popped up in the bottom left. Ashley, what are we seeing in that corner?
Well, and it just changed from what I was going to say. So
I love
right
it.
now, green is taking over.
I know, we did green and purple, neck and neck, green and purple, neck and neck.
So 3 shared priorities.
Oh, that's wonderful to see. That's
Mm-hmm.
wonderful to see. I mean, sometimes I think we do these at the start of a proposal process. That it's like, okay, the norm now is that we can't do anything unless we have feedback meetings and getting some input. But it's not something that we do as a practice.
Right.
We make a decision and then we go implement. We being very royal metaphorically. But the community mobilization shifts that and says everything is done in this kind of metaphor. And Team Hawaii, maybe you could talk a little bit about how it is you've done these 4 things with this diversity of CAT teams for us. Maybe you could share a little bit. Team?
Well,
Are you all looking at each other?
well, different teams are at different levels.
Yeah.
So,
no surprise there.
what we're doing is through the annual meetings that we have every year, to educate and train the teams. So I'm.
Well, let me pull up the slide here. We have a slide with your goals and your objectives. And actually, okay, this is a perfect slide. We have the slide up with the kind of rainbow spectrum you have with individuals and relationships. Oh, there it was. And I think this might be a great way to kind of share with folks, what that looks like, is that you've identified root causes and structures, and for different folks, they've settled in a different place. Can you talk a little bit about how you got to this summary slide?
We're gonna let the Department of Health explain this particular slide which they developed.
So these are what you see listed are the current community action teams, and how we place them currently is what their action plans state. For instance, Kauai is listed under individuals because their action plan is to develop media messaging to increase sexual violence awareness and positive bystander action. And then, for instance, on the community, Safer Bars, their public awareness campaign to address sexual assault connected to bars, collaboration with bar owners and staff to address sexual assault through bar policies and staff training. So it depends on what the community action teams plan that they develop themselves indicate is where they currently are under individual, relationship, community, or societal. And again, it's fluid, so this is currently what their action plans read, but annually at our annual meeting, the teams always get the opportunity to revise their action plans. So they could move from individual. Eventually, we'd like more of the individuals to move towards the right, to more community.
Sure.
So, Annie, you see that HPUD, HPPUD, that's my team on underage drinking, Hawaii Partnership to Prevent Underage Drinking. So we realized that, we would like to perhaps maybe work with Safer Bars teams and sort of collaborate with one another. So there's a lot of fluidity, I guess, within the teams itself as to how sometimes some teams kind of evolve into larger teams, or sometimes they scale back. And we sort of just let our partner with one another, and we just sort of let the teams do whatever they feel best is their fit based on the available resources that they have during that given year or that given time that they're pulled together.
This is Helene. I just want to make sure everybody understands is that when the teams develop their action plan, it is based on the goals and strategies in the bigger 225-page document reduced to 10 pages. So it's not like we let the community action teams develop their own whatever they want. It is based on what is in the bigger document.
And Casey, let's go back a couple slides and put that up. And I know Ashley has a comment. So it's the ones with the goals and objectives for Hawaii. That'll be great. So Ashley, go ahead.
And this is Ashley. So what I really like about this is that, you know, for the Hawaii team, what you're really focused on is the outcomes, the change that these teams are trying to create in their communities. And some of them, you know, you said they're all different levels. Some are there, some are waiting to be there and working towards it. And I think it's so important when we do this work to not just focus on what we're doing. You know, I'm doing art-based, I'm doing media-based, but what is it we're working to change? And that's where a focus on outcomes can really help us reach what we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a question here about if Hawaii could explain a little bit more, and there's some pictures here of them doing their lovely work. What's happening in Kauai and that societal level for Kauai? If you could, if someone could chime in, Rebecca asked that question from the audience. And then Alan, we're going to get to you here in just a sec.
We're going to have Joanne Higashi, our RPE Sexual Violence Coordinator, jump in because, again, she's the one that makes direct connections with each of the community action teams. So Joanne's going to explain about Kauai.
Okay, so Kauai's original
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what? It's a little bit difficult to hear you. So if you could.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Get close to the mic, and you know we just have about a minute, so just give a long summary, and Rebecca will invite you to contact them directly if you want a longer response, but just in a snapshot.
Okay, so Kauai is developing a media messaging to increase SV awareness and positive bystander actions. And I have to be honest, they are kind of reorganizing. They're trying to get more people from the community, from different sectors of the community, because they want to have the coverage. When they do the media, they want to have buy-in from the entire community. So that's a big piece that they're working on right now.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so yeah, so I just wanted to give you one other example. This is for some folks that are in Portland, Oregon, and I just thought it was something that really struck me. I was just reading about it recently, and when we think about kind of the identifying messages that effectively communicate priorities, that is not something that's done by the health department, by law enforcement, by the professionals. When we think about especially engaging marginalized communities, it's bringing the folks together. The mobilization, part of what you're doing is helping develop those prevention messages that are important. And in Portland, you know, it's known as a sustainable city, but that doesn't always resonate with all the communities within it. And to bridge that gap, the health department worked with the region's predominantly African-American churches and faith communities to better understand how to increase access. And in this case, it was consumption of healthy food, local food. And so they spent time developing messages together that were going to be relevant, and that's mobilization. That's part of what mobilization food is. And one of the outcomes of this is that the churches, the mosques, and the faith centers, you know, really crafted specific messages. For example, one of them was God's authentic food. And I share that with you because you could put me in a room with all the resources in the world and I would never come up with that.
Right.
It's not my community. And yet if we want to reach, you know, differing groups, we have to be consistent about engaging messaging that's relevant to them. And so this is a great example of, you know, mobilization is, you know, working with folks to identify the root causes and letting them help craft those messages, even if it's not something you personally would say.
Right.
Yeah. So here's one other example, real quick. It's Hollaback in New York. And I think they're an example that most folks know. If you don't, Ashley, you want to give a quick summary of it on the spot?
It's all about community mobilizing to prevent street harassment. So you know, this picture is the perfect example about really getting out there and really publicly saying we as a community absolutely are not going to accept this.
Right, and the folks in New York didn't start with, you know, a huge group of people. They went through this process of thinking about what they needed to have in place, what skills they needed to have. They started engaging like-minded groups. They started forming advisory groups. And then they started taking on strategic projects and developing messages, and they let every community do their own messaging.
Right.
They have a great website that talks about their process and model, so I wanted to share that back because, it's not about covering the community in chalk. It's about the process of how we build capacity and come together to kind of own and think about our own community culture and the changes.
And I think a good example is Hollaback Boston. They found that public transit was a place where a lot of sexual harassment was happening, and it was also a place where a lot of people were receiving messages and were able to receive messages that could change culture. And so they have a whole campaign that's based in public transit.
Yeah, and thinking about messaging and specific language, Alan, I wanted to share with you, you've been so intentional in thinking about language and message within school community. And you've done some work thinking about how it is you frame the work so that it's relevant in a school community and in a school culture. Could you share a little bit about kind of what you've learned, what advice you would give about kind of language? And we'll put up one of your slides here about fostering coalitions and networks.
Well, sure. One thing in working with adolescents and college university students is they really they don't have a lot of time for BS and for talking around issues. They really want things to be relevant and meaningful, and so to skirt the issue or to talk around some of these issues related to sexual harassment or stalking or dating abuse is really not something that they want to engage in. They really want those authentic conversations. They want them real, and they want to they want to have more of a platform and a stage, if you will, to say that these behaviors, like Hollaback, these behaviors are not okay. Let's call them what they are. Let's challenge those norms that support those acts of violence and abuse. And to do that can be very uncomfortable, and it can be unsettling to those who have the privilege or enjoy the privilege of demonstrating those behaviors. So I think just being real and genuine and authentic goes a long way, and I think that's what social media has been able to capture is the realness. I mean, think about the recent Ray Rice video. Domestic violence did not become real for some people, I say, until they saw the actual video of the assault in the elevator, and that's it says something about our culture overall. Is that when we taste it and feel it and touch it, now it becomes real, and I think in our efforts to train and raise awareness, but also to address primary prevention, we have to just be authentic, and I think Hollaback is a group that really does. These words are said, and these words hurt people and lead to other abusive and violent acts.
I mean, I think for me, one of the things I'm interested in is it's not so much the genuine messages, but how you make sure, how do I want to say this? I don't necessarily think, and folks can disagree with me, that if I'm going into a school setting, on my first kind of lead and engagement, and language is about how real this all is, and that perhaps, and I think the slide we had up is a good example, is that I am thinking about it in terms of a school district issue and thinking about the impact on learning and thinking about what's important for the schools and how I make a connection in my language and use language that the schools is connected with. I don't disagree with what you're saying at all, but I think one of the things you've done really well in doing your analysis is thinking about how it is that we approach a group that uses a different set of language, but also has a different comfort level, especially when you're thinking about sexual assault. We have to acknowledge that there's a different comfort level, and we can't demand folks, in some ways, watch the proverbial video. That's an important step to take, but we also have to acknowledge their culture and language as we come in as outsiders.
I think just to answer your question, thanks for clarifying that. I think if we as a group of advocates and sexual violence prevention educators who are in community who want access or to engage more deeply and fully with schools, one of the ways is to approach the ultimate outcome is that this is a leadership issue, or I should say, it's a lack of leadership issue if these acts of violence occur. But posing as leadership, posing as a proactive, pro-social, healthy, respectful approach to prevention. Kids listen to that, and parents listen to that. So do school leaders.
Yeah, and I think Deborah makes a really important point that it's a complicated balance of the energy of the group and staying with focused on what we've learned works and takes effective direction. One of the real challenges of community mobilization is sometimes the community is really mobilized about something that you may or may not be comfortable with, whether it's too forward or not forward enough.
And this is where I found that it's so helpful if I, for example, see myself as, maybe I'm a facilitator, but I'm definitely not there as the director, right, the authority.
Yeah. And I think it's, those concepts of ownership within all of this as well. Let's go to the next slide. Thanks. So the last thing we wanted to do was, and David, this is in honor of you, making sure to take a minute to talk about measuring community mobilization. So we talked about how important it is to think about the practice, the training, how important it is to engage the community, and then use these strategies of root causes, strategic projects, and messaging to develop those shared priorities. And I think Hawaii has done that. In each of their groups, you have a shared umbrella priority, and you've let folks kind of think about the strategies differently. One of the articles I've read recently that I thought was really interesting about measuring community mobilization happens to take place in Hawaii, and I think perhaps the public health department there was involved in it. I thought this was fascinating. They wanted to measure, and this project is one is about child abuse and neglect, but it's called Mapping One Strong Ohana, using a network analysis in GIS to enhance the effectiveness. And this shows the islands of Hawaii, and it shows through a phone survey how aware folks are with the risk and resilience factors around child abuse, primary prevention. The X's overlaid where they had community action teams, where, and they didn't use that particular term, but where they had collaborative partners in their network. And so they were measuring how awareness was correlated with the location of their partners geographically, which I think is really interesting. But also it said that it guided them in which communities they wanted to do outreach to and bring mobilization to. The other slide they've done is the network analysis. And again, there's all kinds of free software that help folks think about this. So if you're mobilizing communities in like a school setting, like Alan's doing, you could do a network analysis to think about who's talking with who and how often. Ashley, have you seen these kind of things before, the mapping kind of awareness and collaborative locations and network analysis?
I have, and I have to say, they can seem overwhelming at first, but when you use them, they're very user-friendly, and it really helps. I'm a visual person, so it really helps for me to be able to see what's happening and to see the location and see those correlations between what we're doing and what's changing.
And what got me excited is that, sometimes I think with community mobilization, it's like, how many people did we get at the event, right? And that's an important piece of it. But this actually gets to how the community mobilization changes community culture and shifts those norms, that folks are more connected, folks are more active. They have a better understanding of what is important in terms of prevention and risk and resilience factors. So these are things that I think are really interesting.
Ashley, this is Helene. I find it very exciting and interesting that you're using the One Strong Ohana, which is another one of my programs that I supervise, Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention and the Hawaii Children's Trust Fund. So One Strong Ohana is a campaign to prevent child abuse and neglect, raise awareness here in Hawaii, and it's still going strong here. So I found it exciting that you brought that up.
I know, surprise, this is Annie. I found it and I read it and I read through and I said, I have a feeling she's totally connected to this. But I wanted to go ahead and do it without telling you because I thought, I wanted to separate it a little bit, but it's a great article. It's available online and, it's really making the rounds and folks thinking about how do we measure the effectiveness of coalitions. And Deborah asked a question, if you're using this as an outcome measure, and in this piece they are. This is not clearly what the RPE team is using, so I did want to separate that out. So,
Helene, I just wanted to, I wonder if we can go back to because it's related to measurement, our slide with the canoes, Laulima, many hands working together. because all of us, and I know Alan mentioned the other day he'd like to be in one of the canoes. Well, we all are part of, we all have a seat in the canoe. And if you can go back to the La Lima, Many Hands Working Together, the canoe slide, if well, we'd like to wrap up basically how that.
There we go.
Okay, there. So I'm going to have Valerie describe why this slide really picks RPE and community mobilization here in Hawaii.
All right, Valerie, I'm going to let you close us off today, but I do want to acknowledge that we have 1 minute left on the web conference, and you're setting us up for a perfect conclusion. So I do want to acknowledge the great work that you're doing in Iowa, Alan, and helping us think through some of these kind of structural pieces. This is just an initial conversation. Community mobilization is big, it's deep, there's a lot of places to go, but I hope today we gave you some concrete steps and kind of some shared definitions that can help move your work forward. I'm really interested this is a strategy. I think it holds a lot of promise for health equity, for social justice, for all of those other things. So thank you all for joining us today, and we'll turn it over to Hawaii to finish us out with this beautiful image.
Okay, and I'd like to just thank Annie and Ashley, the team, Alan, and everyone listening in. Okay, so you see the paddling there? It says La Lima, Many Hands Working Together. Well, it's a Hawaiian canoe, and there's different seats. The first seat, the first paddler actually is a pace setter, which sets a good rhythm. The second person is the caller, so he or she would basically say hut, whether you're paddling on the right or the left side. Seats 3, 4, and 5 are like the engine, the real pace setters. They keep up with the first seat there, setting the pace. And seat 5 is the steersman. So that person is actually turning the canoe to the right, to the left, what have you. And that we felt is a really good depiction of our team building, because team building, when we're talking about community mobilization, is actually essential for us to all work together in a good consensus, have consensus with one another, but we're moving at the same pace, we're moving in the same route, but sometimes too, some of the canoes in the back overtake the canoes in the front. So I always mention there's different times, different resources, and that way we're setting different paces, but we're all going in the same direction, and we recognize that. That's why we thought La Lima, this photo, is a great depiction of how community mobilization works.
Oh, thank you for that so much. We did sneak in one final question for you guys. Alice is interested in getting a copy of the 250-page to a 10-page tool. So perhaps one of you could respond in text chat and connect with Alice so that she could do that further. With that, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Claire asked a question about PowerPoints. Let me turn it over to Ashley to finalize it. Thank you for sharing, everyone. We really appreciate your time. See you next year.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for joining. I will be posting the recording. The slides are posted, and we will have the text chat posted on the link that I've put a number of times, just put it in again in the text chat. I will leave the text chat open for a few more minutes, and then we will close it out. And this officially concludes this Prevent Connect session. Please complete the evaluation. That will be emailed to you in about 30 minutes, and we look forward to seeing you in the next fiscal year.
Yes, in 2 weeks next year.
Yes.
All right, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Bye.